It all began on an ordinary Tuesday morning. The sun was shining, and the birds were chirping as I sipped my coffee, preparing for another day with my beloved wife, who has faced more challenges in her life than most people can imagine. She is a remarkable woman, resilient and strong, despite the disabilities that have shaped our daily lives. For years, we had created a comfortable home that catered to her needs, a sanctuary where she could feel safe and supported. But our peaceful existence was shattered by the arrival of a letter from our Homeowners Association, commonly known as the HOA. Initially, I brushed it off as just another bureaucratic nuisance, something every homeowner has to deal with. However, as I read through their complaints, my stomach sank. They were accusing us of violating several community rules, claiming we had made unauthorized modifications to our property. The modifications they referred to were minor adjustments designed specifically to make our home more accessible for my wife. What struck me the most was not just the absurdity of their claims but the tone of the letter. It dripped with condescension and judgment, as if they were passing sentence on our family's way of life. The HOA representatives seemed more concerned with maintaining some arbitrary standard than ensuring that all residents could enjoy their homes comfortably and safely. I couldn't help but feel that their actions were rooted in discrimination rather than genuine concern for community aesthetics. As days turned into weeks, the situation escalated. The HOA began sending representatives to our home, issuing fines and threats of legal action if we did not comply with their demands. Each visit felt like an invasion of our privacy, a reminder that we were being scrutinized not just as homeowners but as individuals who dared to live differently. My wife's health deteriorated under this stress. I could see her spirit wavering as she faced harassment from those who should have been fostering a supportive environment. In quiet moments, I would watch her struggle with anxiety and fear, emotions she had fought so hard to overcome in her life. It was heartbreaking to see how the HOA's relentless pursuit affected her mental well-being. I knew something had to change, and fast. I resolved that we would not remain silent or submissive in the face of such injustice. That night marked a turning point for me. As I sat at my desk surrounded by stacks of paperwork and legal texts, a fire ignited within me. This wasn't just about compliance. It was about defending my wife and asserting our right to live freely in our own home without undue harassment. I began researching HOA laws and regulations, seeking any loophole that could provide us with leverage against these bullies. Little did I know that this journey would lead me down a path filled with confrontation and ultimately culminate in an unexpected scenario. A live television broadcast where I would have the chance to expose their misconduct to the world. But first, I had to prepare for battle against an organization that seemed determined to strip away our dignity and peace of mind. No longer would we be victims. We would stand tall and fight back together. The turning point in our struggle with the HOA came unexpectedly on a particularly difficult day. My wife had just finished a long week of therapy and was physically and emotionally exhausted. She had been making tremendous progress, but the anxiety stemming from the HOA's harassment loomed over her like a dark cloud. We had made adjustments around our home to accommodate her disabilities, installing handrails, widening doorways, and creating a more accessible layout. These changes, while essential for her well-being, were now being scrutinized as violations of HOA regulations. That morning, I noticed my wife was unusually quiet. As she sat on the couch, staring out the window, I could see the weight of the world on her shoulders. The mail arrived, and as I flipped through the usual bills and advertisements, I spotted another envelope from the HOA. My heart sank as I read its contents. They were scheduling a formal inspection of our property to assess alleged violations. It felt like an invasion, not just of our home but of our lives. The day of the inspection arrived with an unsettling atmosphere hanging in the air. The HOA representative knocked on our door with an air of authority that made my skin crawl. I could sense my wife's anxiety building as I opened the door. The representative entered our home with a clipboard in hand, surveying every inch with a critical eye. Each comment he made felt like another jab at my wife's dignity. "Do you realize these modifications are against community policy?" he asked dismissively, gesturing towards the handrails we had installed. "They aren't aesthetically pleasing." His words felt like daggers aimed at my wife's character and our family's right to create a safe environment for her. I could see my wife struggling to hold back tears as she listened to him criticize our home, a place we had worked so hard to make comfortable and functional for her needs. It was heartbreaking to witness this man's indifference towards her struggles. He seemed utterly oblivious to the fact that these modifications were not merely cosmetic choices. They were lifelines for my wife's independence. As the inspection dragged on, it became clear that he wasn't there to understand or empathize. He was there to enforce rules that felt archaic and unjust. The more he spoke, the angrier I became. I felt an overwhelming urge to defend my wife and our home from what felt like an unwarranted attack. When he finally left, I turned to my wife, who was visibly shaken. "I'm so sorry," I said softly, pulling her into an embrace. "This isn't right." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "I just want to feel safe in my own home." That moment solidified my resolve. No longer would we be passive victims in this fight. It was time to take action and reclaim our peace of mind. The incident illuminated the disparity between what we needed as a family and the rigid expectations imposed by the HOA. It became clear to me that their actions were rooted not just in rules but in a lack of understanding and compassion. Fueled by this incident, I knew that we needed to find a way to expose their bullying tactics, not just for ourselves but for others who might be suffering in silence under similar circumstances. That day marked a pivotal shift in our journey, a shift from fear to determination to confront this injustice head-on. As the dust settled after that harrowing inspection, a fire ignited within me. I could no longer remain passive while the HOA continued to threaten our home and my wife's well-being. The incident had revealed the extent of their arrogance and disregard for our needs, and I knew it was time to take a stand. I made the decision to fight back, not only for my wife but for anyone else who might be suffering under similar oppressive tactics from the HOA. In that moment, I resolved that we would no longer be victims. We would become advocates for ourselves and others like us. The first step in this journey was to arm myself with knowledge. I dove headfirst into researching HOA regulations, understanding our legal rights as homeowners, and discovering how such associations functioned. I spent hours poring over documents, legal texts, and community guidelines, trying to find any loophole or regulation that could support our case. I also began reaching out to neighbors and other homeowners in our community who had faced similar issues with the HOA. To my surprise, many shared their own stories of frustration and fear, feeling powerless against an organization that seemed more interested in enforcing rules than fostering community spirit. It became clear that we were not alone. There was a collective discontent simmering beneath the surface. During this process of gathering information and building connections, I stumbled upon an online forum dedicated to homeowner rights. It was a treasure trove of resources, offering guidance on how to navigate disputes with HOAs. I found stories of individuals who had successfully fought back against these organizations, often by exposing their misconduct publicly or through legal channels. Inspired by their experiences, I realized that we could do the same. The idea of going public began to take shape in my mind. I envisioned standing up on a platform where our voices could be heard, where we could share our story with an audience beyond our neighborhood. A live television broadcast would offer an unparalleled opportunity to shine a light on the HOA's bullying tactics, while emphasizing the importance of compassion and understanding for those with disabilities. But before taking that leap into the public eye, I knew we needed solid evidence to support our claims. With determination fueling me, I started documenting every encounter with the HOA, recording conversations, saving correspondence, and gathering testimonies from others affected by their actions. This meticulous preparation would serve as the foundation for our defense when we faced them publicly. I also consulted with legal experts who specialized in homeowner rights. They provided invaluable advice on how to frame our situation legally and prepared me for what to expect during a potential confrontation. Each consultation filled me with more confidence. It felt as if I were slowly assembling an arsenal against an unjust enemy. As my understanding deepened, so did my resolve. This fight was not just about us. It was about standing up for those who felt voiceless against oppressive entities like HOAs. My wife's courage inspired me every step of the way. She had faced numerous challenges throughout her life, and now it was my turn to show her that she wasn't alone. With each passing day, our plans took shape, fueled by anger at the injustice we faced and a desire for change. Together, we would confront the HOA, not just as individuals but as advocates seeking justice for all those who had been wronged by rigid rules devoid of humanity. It was time to make our voices heard in a way that would resonate far beyond our neighborhood, paving the way for others to join us in standing up against such injustices. With our decision made to confront the HOA publicly, the next phase of our journey began: preparation for the showdown. I knew that to effectively dismantle their claims and expose their misconduct, every detail needed to be meticulously planned. This wouldn't just be a casual encounter. It would be a strategic battle fought in front of a live audience. The first step was organizing all the evidence I had gathered. I sorted through months of correspondence, complaints, and inspection reports, creating a comprehensive dossier that documented the HOA's actions against us. Each piece of evidence was a puzzle piece in our narrative, showcasing not only their overreach but also how it affected my wife's quality of life. I organized this material into clear categories: legal violations, emotional distress caused by their harassment, and testimonies from neighbors who stood with us. In addition to compiling evidence, I focused on crafting our story. It was crucial to present our case not just as a list of grievances but as a compelling narrative that would resonate with viewers. I wanted to evoke empathy and understanding from the audience while clearly illustrating the broader implications of the HOA's actions. With my wife's help, we practiced articulating our experiences, emphasizing her struggles and the lengths we had gone to create a safe home for her. As we prepared, I reached out to legal experts for advice on how to frame our arguments. They provided crucial insights into HOA regulations and helped me understand what legal precedents might bolster our case. Armed with this knowledge, I crafted a clear outline of points I wanted to address during the broadcast. Each point was designed not only to counter the HOA's claims but also to highlight the importance of compassion and understanding in community living. I also enlisted the support of neighbors who had faced similar issues with the HOA. Their testimonies would add weight to our case, demonstrating that this was not an isolated incident but part of a larger pattern of oppressive behavior by the association. We coordinated schedules and prepared statements that they could present during the broadcast, establishing a united front against an organization that had caused harm not just to us but to others in our community. As the date of the live broadcast approached, anxiety began to creep in. The thought of standing before a camera and facing off against representatives from the HOA was both exhilarating and terrifying. I worried about how we would be received by viewers. Would they empathize with our plight or dismiss us as mere complainers? To combat my nerves, I practiced deep breathing exercises and visualized myself confidently addressing the audience. On the day leading up to the broadcast, we received confirmation that representatives from the HOA would also be present, further intensifying my resolve. This was no longer just about us. It was about standing up against an unjust system that bullied those who were vulnerable. The stakes felt higher than ever. The night before the broadcast, my wife and I sat together in our living room, reflecting on everything we had gone through. She squeezed my hand tightly and said, "Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm proud of us for fighting back." Her words filled me with strength and determination. In that moment, I realized that this fight wasn't only about winning. It was about reclaiming our dignity and inspiring others to stand up for their rights. With renewed focus and commitment, we went to bed that night knowing we were ready for whatever lay ahead. It was time to face the HOA head-on. No more hiding in fear or letting them dictate our lives. We would dismantle their claims one by one and show everyone watching that compassion and justice must prevail over oppression. The day of the live television broadcast dawned with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. As I prepared for the confrontation, I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. This was it, the moment we had been working towards for weeks. It was our chance to share our story with the world and expose the HOA's unjust treatment of my wife and our family. Arriving at the studio, I was struck by the buzz of activity around me. Crew members scurried to set up cameras and lights, while producers went over last-minute details. My heart raced as I took in the scene, but I reminded myself of our purpose: to advocate for those who felt powerless against oppressive forces. Once inside the studio, I found my wife sitting in a green room, her face a mix of determination and nerves. She smiled at me, and in that moment, I felt a surge of confidence. We were in this together, ready to fight for our rights and the rights of others. We embraced tightly, seeking comfort in each other's presence. As we walked onto the set, the host greeted us warmly. The bright lights illuminated the studio, creating an atmosphere that felt both daunting and exhilarating. The camera turned towards us, and I could sense thousands of eyes watching, waiting to hear what we had to say. Taking a deep breath, I focused on my wife's reassuring presence beside me. The host introduced our segment, framing it as a discussion about homeowner associations and their impact on families. With each word spoken by the host, my heart pounded louder in my chest. Soon enough, it was time for us to share our story. As we began recounting our experiences with the HOA, I could feel my emotions rising to the surface. When it was my turn to speak, I addressed the audience directly. What happened to us is not just an isolated incident. It reflects a troubling pattern of how some HOAs operate, I stated firmly. I detailed how the HOA's actions had affected my wife's health and well-being, how their relentless pursuit of compliance had stripped away her sense of safety in our home. As I spoke, I noticed the host nodding along and engaging with our narrative. It felt like they truly understood the gravity of our situation. The cameras captured not only our words but also the emotional weight behind them. My wife then shared her perspective, her struggles with anxiety and fear caused by the HOA's harassment. Hearing her voice crack as she described her experience stirred something deep within me. It was a powerful reminder of why we were fighting. When we finished sharing our story, we were met with applause from the audience in the studio. It was an unexpected moment that filled me with gratitude and hope. But then came the moment we had been anticipating. The HOA representatives took their seats across from us. The tension in the room thickened as they attempted to defend their actions. Their words felt rehearsed and devoid of empathy as they dismissed our claims, insisting they were merely enforcing community standards. But this time, armed with evidence and support from neighbors who had rallied behind us, I was ready. With conviction, I countered their arguments point by point, highlighting how their regulations had disregarded compassion for those with disabilities. The camera zoomed in on my wife as she spoke directly to them about how their harassment had affected her mental health. Throughout our exchange, it became evident that they were unprepared for our passionate defense. Their facade began to crack under scrutiny as we dismantled their claims live on air. The atmosphere shifted. What started as a confrontation turned into a platform for advocacy. As the segment concluded, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Not just because we had stood up against injustice, but because we had done so together as a united front. We hadn't just shared our story. We had opened a dialogue about compassion and understanding within communities everywhere. Walking off that set hand in hand with my wife, I realized that this was just the beginning of something much larger than ourselves. A movement toward awareness and change that would resonate far beyond our neighborhood. As the live broadcast concluded, an unexpected wave of support began to pour in from viewers across the country. Social media exploded with comments and messages expressing solidarity with our fight against the HOA. People were sharing their own experiences of dealing with similar associations, many echoing our sentiments about the need for compassion and understanding in community regulations. It was clear that our story resonated with a larger audience, and I felt a sense of empowerment knowing we were not alone in this battle. However, the real work was just beginning. The next step was to ensure that the HOA's misconduct was not only acknowledged but also addressed publicly. We knew that our appearance on television had opened doors, but we needed to leverage that visibility to effect real change. I began collaborating with local advocacy groups focused on homeowner rights and disability awareness, seeking their guidance on how to escalate our cause. We organized a community meeting where residents could come together to discuss their grievances with the HOA. The turnout exceeded my expectations. Neighbors filled the room, eager to share their stories of frustration and fear. As they recounted their experiences, it became increasingly clear that the HOA's tactics were not just targeted at us but had affected many families throughout the neighborhood. The shared pain created a powerful sense of unity among us. During this meeting, I presented the evidence we had compiled during our preparations for the broadcast, emails, inspection reports, and testimonies from other homeowners who had felt bullied by the HOA. As I spoke passionately about our experiences and those of our neighbors, I could see the determination in everyone's eyes. We were not going to let this organization dictate how we lived in our own homes any longer. Inspired by the momentum of the meeting, we decided to draft a formal petition outlining our grievances. The petition would call for changes in how the HOA operated, specifically demanding greater transparency, accountability, and compassion in enforcing regulations. We knew that if enough residents signed it, we could present it to both the HOA board and local government officials. With each signature collected, I felt a growing sense of hope. It wasn't just about us anymore. It was about fostering a community where everyone felt safe and respected. Our efforts quickly gained traction as more residents joined our movement, sharing their stories and lending their voices to our cause. In parallel, I reached out to local media outlets to further expose the HOA's misconduct. I wanted to ensure that their actions were scrutinized under public scrutiny, amplifying our message beyond just our neighborhood. News stations began covering our meetings and interviews with residents who had been impacted by the HOA's stringent rules. The more attention we garnered, the more pressure built on the HOA. As part of our advocacy efforts, we also invited legal experts to speak at community forums. They provided valuable insights into homeowners' rights and discussed how residents could work together to hold HOAs accountable for their actions. Educating fellow homeowners empowered them to stand up against unfair practices. It was during one of these forums that I received an unexpected call. Several local politicians wanted to meet with us regarding our campaign. They had heard about our fight through media coverage and wanted to discuss potential legislative changes that could protect homeowners from overreaching HOA regulations. This was a pivotal moment, a chance to take our fight from grassroots activism to formal policy change. As we prepared for this important meeting with local leaders, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we had come since that initial confrontation with the HOA. What started as a personal struggle had transformed into a movement advocating for justice and compassion within our community. Together, we were shedding light on issues that affected many families like ours, proving that even in the face of adversity, unity can lead to meaningful change. The aftermath of our live broadcast was nothing short of transformative. As the dust settled, the immediate impact was palpable. Our story had resonated with viewers far beyond our expectations, sparking conversations about homeowner rights, disability awareness, and the responsibilities of HOAs. The public response was overwhelming. Countless messages flooded in from people who had experienced similar situations, sharing their gratitude for our courage in speaking out. In the days following the broadcast, local media outlets continued to cover our story extensively. Interviews with my wife and me were featured in newspapers and on various news channels, amplifying our message about the need for compassion and understanding in community governance. This constant visibility kept the momentum rolling, drawing attention not only to our fight but also to the broader implications of how HOAs operate. However, it wasn't just the public that took notice. The HOA itself felt the pressure. Faced with increased scrutiny and a growing chorus of voices demanding accountability, they quickly shifted their approach. The board members called an emergency meeting to address our concerns, a move that sent a clear signal that they were aware of the fallout from our televised confrontation. Feeling empowered by the support we had received, I organized a follow-up meeting with residents to discuss our next steps. It was evident that many felt emboldened by our efforts. Neighbors who had previously been hesitant to speak out were now eager to share their stories and stand alongside us. We collectively drafted a letter outlining our concerns and requesting a formal dialogue with the HOA board. This letter would serve as both a demand for accountability and a request for meaningful change within the association. To my surprise, we received a prompt response from the HOA. They agreed to meet with us, a significant shift from their previous dismissive stance. As we prepared for this meeting, I felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Would they genuinely listen to our concerns? Or would they continue to prioritize rules over compassion? The day of the meeting arrived, and we gathered as a united front, neighbors standing together in solidarity. Representatives from the HOA arrived, noticeably more subdued than in previous encounters. It became clear that they were aware of the shift in public perception and understood that their actions could no longer go unchecked. During the meeting, I presented our case with clarity and conviction, addressing not only our personal experiences, but also highlighting testimonies from others who had been impacted by their actions. The atmosphere was tense but constructive. There were moments of genuine dialogue where HOA representatives expressed willingness to reconsider certain regulations based on feedback from residents. We discussed potential amendments to existing policies that would better accommodate individuals with disabilities while still maintaining community standards. The conversation felt productive. Unlike previous interactions, there was an openness to change that I hadn't anticipated. As we left that meeting, I felt an overwhelming sense of hope. While we had not resolved all issues in one sitting, it was evident that we were making progress. The HOA seemed willing to engage constructively rather than resorting to confrontation. This shift illustrated the power of community action and advocacy. When individuals unite for a common cause, change is not only possible, it becomes inevitable. In the days that followed, I continued to receive messages from supporters encouraging us to keep pushing for reform within the HOA structure. Each message reinforced my belief that this fight was about more than just my wife or our home. It was about creating a more inclusive environment where everyone could thrive without fear of discrimination or harassment. Reflecting on everything we had accomplished so far filled me with pride and determination. We had turned a painful experience into a catalyst for change, not only for ourselves but for many others who might feel powerless against similar injustices. The fight was far from over, but we were more committed than ever to ensuring that everyone's voice mattered in shaping their own community. The journey we had embarked upon since the confrontation with the HOA had profoundly impacted both my wife and me, reshaping our lives in ways we could never have anticipated. As we navigated the tumultuous waters of advocacy and community engagement, I witnessed a remarkable transformation in my wife. The emotional toll of the HOA's harassment had weighed heavily on her, causing anxiety and self-doubt to creep in. But as we began to fight back, I saw her spirit rekindle. With each small victory, whether it was gathering support from neighbors or engaging in meaningful discussions with the HOA, her confidence grew. She started to take ownership of her narrative, finding her voice in a way that I had not seen in years. The very act of standing up for herself and our home reinvigorated her sense of agency. It was as if she had shed the weight of oppression that had been bearing down on her since the HOA began its campaign of intimidation. One afternoon, as we sat together reviewing documents for an upcoming community meeting, she looked at me with a newfound determination. "I never realized how strong I could be until I had to fight for what is right," she said. Those words resonated deeply with me. It became clear that this fight wasn't just about confronting an unjust system. It was also about personal growth and empowerment. As we continued to engage with our community, I found that my own perspective had shifted significantly. Initially, I was driven by anger and a desire to protect my wife. But over time, I began to understand that our battle was part of a larger struggle for justice and equity within our neighborhood. Each conversation with fellow residents revealed layers of frustration and resilience, reminding me that many people were grappling with their own challenges. This realization fostered a deeper sense of empathy within me. It was no longer just about our individual experience. It was about collective healing and progress. The support from our neighbors extended beyond mere words. It manifested in tangible ways as well. We began organizing events aimed at fostering community spirit. A potluck dinner here, a neighborhood cleanup there, all designed to strengthen connections among residents. These gatherings not only allowed us to bond over shared experiences, but also provided opportunities for individuals to voice their concerns in a safe environment. The warmth and camaraderie that developed among us became a balm for the wounds inflicted by the HOA's actions. While the advocacy work brought us closer together as a community, it also created challenges at home. The emotional labor involved in standing up against the HOA took its toll on both of us. There were days when we felt exhausted, mentally drained from navigating meetings and discussions filled with conflict. My wife would sometimes retreat into herself after particularly challenging encounters. During those moments, I made it my mission to reassure her that we were in this together, that every step forward was worth it for the sake of our home and future. Through these ups and downs, we learned the importance of self-care amidst the chaos of activism. We carved out time for each other, whether it was simple evenings spent watching movies or quiet mornings enjoying coffee on our porch. These moments reminded us why we were fighting in the first place. Not just for a house, but for a home filled with love and understanding. Looking back on this journey, I recognize how much both my wife and I have grown through this experience. We have become advocates not only for ourselves but for others who may feel marginalized by rigid systems. Our commitment to standing up against injustice has instilled a greater sense of purpose in our lives, a commitment to creating a world where compassion reigns over compliance. Ultimately, this fight has been transformative, not just for us but for our entire community as well. It has taught us that even amidst adversity, there is strength in unity and power in perseverance. Together, we are building a future where everyone feels valued and heard. A future worth fighting for every single day. As our fight against the HOA continued to gain traction, it became increasingly clear that our story was not just a localized issue. It had broader implications that resonated across communities nationwide. The challenges we faced were emblematic of a systemic problem present in many homeowner associations. A rigid adherence to rules and regulations that often overshadowed compassion and understanding for residents' unique circumstances. One of the most significant implications of our experience was the conversation it sparked about the treatment of individuals with disabilities within community settings. Many homeowners associations were established to maintain property values and aesthetics, but in doing so, they frequently overlooked the diverse needs of residents. My wife's story highlighted how these regulations could inadvertently marginalize those who required accommodations to live comfortably and safely. This revelation opened the door for discussions about the need for HOAs to adopt more inclusive policies that prioritize accessibility. As we engaged with other homeowners and local advocacy groups, we learned of numerous instances where families had faced similar struggles. In several cases, individuals with disabilities felt compelled to either conform to stringent HOA rules or abandon their homes altogether. These stories underscored a painful reality, that many people were sacrificing their quality of life due to an inflexible system designed without consideration for everyone's needs. Our fight had become a rallying cry for change, not just in our neighborhood but across various communities grappling with similar challenges. The media coverage of our situation further amplified these discussions. News outlets began reporting on not only our specific case but also on broader issues surrounding HOAs, highlighting how their policies could perpetuate exclusion rather than foster community. This increased visibility drew attention from policymakers and advocates alike, prompting calls for reform that would ensure fair treatment for all residents, especially those with disabilities. In response to the growing awareness, we started exploring legislative avenues to effect change at a higher level. Collaborating with local advocacy organizations, we sought to draft proposals that would encourage HOAs to implement policies reflecting sensitivity towards residents' needs. Our aim was to promote regulations that upheld property standards while ensuring that individuals with disabilities received the accommodations necessary for their well-being. This endeavor was not merely about our fight. It was about laying the groundwork for future generations to thrive in inclusive environments. The conversations we initiated also began to extend beyond the realm of HOAs. They sparked a wider dialogue about community governance and the responsibilities that come with it. People started questioning how decisions are made within their own communities and whether those decisions reflect the values of inclusivity and empathy. The importance of community engagement became a focal point, emphasizing that residents should have a voice in shaping policies that directly affect their lives. Through this journey, I realized that our experience was part of a larger narrative about justice and equity within community living. It illuminated the need for ongoing conversations about how we can create environments where everyone feels valued, respected, and safe, regardless of their circumstances. Ultimately, our fight against the HOA served as a catalyst for change that reached far beyond our neighborhood. It ignited discussions about accessibility, inclusion, and compassion in community governance, a testament to the power of collective action and advocacy. As we continued to engage with others affected by similar issues, it became clear that together we could challenge oppressive systems and advocate for a future where every resident's voice matters. As we moved forward in this fight, I held on to the hope that our story would inspire others to stand up against injustice in their own communities. Together, we could forge a path toward meaningful change, one where compassion triumphed over conformity, and where every individual felt empowered to claim their rightful place within their home and community. As we reflect on the journey that began with an unjust attack on my disabled wife, it's clear that our struggle has transformed into something far greater than we ever imagined. What started as a personal battle against a homeowners association quickly evolved into a movement for justice and inclusivity, impacting not only our lives but the lives of countless others facing similar challenges. The confrontation we faced was not just about the rules imposed by an HOA. It was about standing up for the dignity and rights of individuals who often feel marginalized and unheard. Our story became a beacon of hope for those trapped in systems that prioritize regulations over compassion. We learned that when individuals come together to advocate for change, they can dismantle barriers and create communities that celebrate diversity rather than suppress it. Through this experience, we discovered the power of community engagement and the importance of giving a voice to those who have been silenced. By sharing our story on live television, we catalyzed conversations about accessibility and understanding within communities across the nation. The support we received reinforced our belief in the strength that arises from solidarity. When people unite for a common cause, they can affect real change. As we move forward, it's crucial to recognize that this fight is ongoing. The challenges faced by individuals with disabilities and marginalized communities are still prevalent in many neighborhoods. As homeowners and residents, we must remain vigilant and proactive in advocating for inclusive policies within our communities. It is our responsibility to challenge oppressive systems and demand accountability from those in power. So, what can you do? First, educate yourself about your rights as a homeowner and the regulations in your community. Understand how HOAs operate and familiarize yourself with their rules. Knowledge is power, and being informed will equip you to address any issues that may arise. Next, reach out to your neighbors. Create a network of support where residents can share their experiences and concerns openly. Together, you can identify common challenges and strategize ways to address them collectively. Whether it's organizing community meetings or forming advocacy groups, collaboration enhances your ability to affect change. If you encounter unfair treatment from an HOA or any governing body, don't hesitate to speak up. Document your experiences meticulously. Keep records of communications, gather testimonies from others affected, and build a compelling case for change. Use social media platforms or local media outlets to share your story. Your voice can amplify the struggles faced by many. Finally, consider engaging with local advocacy organizations focused on homeowner rights and disability awareness. These groups often provide resources, legal assistance, and guidance on navigating complex situations with HOAs. Partnering with established organizations can strengthen your efforts and expand your reach. In conclusion, our journey has shown us that resilience is forged through adversity, and collective action has the power to reshape communities for the better. As we continue this fight for justice and inclusivity, let us remain steadfast in our commitment to fostering environments where everyone feels valued and respected. Together, we can build communities that prioritize compassion over conformity, where every individual has the right to live freely without fear of discrimination or harassment. Let this be a call to action. Stand up for your rights, advocate for those who cannot, and together, let us create a future where every voice matters. Your involvement can spark change. It starts with you.